Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Ieuter Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Offshore Tackle, Garber Chevrolet, Rapid River Knife Works, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to another edition of the Outdoor Magazine radio show here on the Outdoor Magazine radio network on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan. And so glad to have you along with us once again as we continue this 3-hour celebration of the outdoor lifestyle here in the great state of Michigan, the history and tradition of hunting and fishing and shooting and trapping, getting outdoors, getting some fresh air, feeling a cool breeze on your neck, maybe getting a little bit wet, maybe getting a little bit cold, maybe getting uncomfortable, but that's all part of it. Well, last week we weren't worried about getting cold or wet, were we? Now, by the time you hear this show, the forecast looks like it's going to be a little bit more reasonable, a little bit more seasonable. But, oh, man, last weekend and the first part of last week, brutal. Brutal. Hot. I mean, really hot. But again, 30 degrees cooler this weekend than it was last weekend, and I'm all for it. You can feel it changing though. Even when it was so ridiculously hot, you could see it was changing. The leaves are starting to change. At my house, I got a pond behind the house, and my office is in the basement, and I like to keep the window open so I can hear the sounds from the pond. And the red-winged blackbirds that I look forward to so much every spring, because that to me is the true sound of springtime. They've been kind of quiet lately, but just these last few days, they've started to squawk. And though I haven't seen them flock up, I feel like they're squawking and talking and starting to flock up a little bit. Like maybe pretty soon they're gonna make the jump south. But it's just one more sign that we're changing seasons. I did take advantage though of the summer-like weather to take care of the Angler Quest. I know. I'm missing some great fall fishing out on Saginaw Bay. These next couple of months, 6 weeks or whatever, until it ices up, whenever it is. If it does ice up, when you get into cooler weather, cooler temps, water temp was still 69 when I was out there the other day, the fishing for big fish is going to get really, really good. And I'm missing that by putting my Angler Quest away, right? No. I have friends who have boats who are going to keep theirs in the water until the ice comes, including Mr. Angler Quest himself, Brad Dupuis. He says, Mike, you can fish with me anytime. In fact, he says, you can take my boat out. I would never do that, though, right? Have you ever done that? Have you ever taken somebody up on their offer? Now, it's got to be a really, really good friend or a relative. They say, go ahead and take my boat. It just doesn't seem right. You know, I mean, somebody's boat, you're going to take somebody else's boat out? What more can you offer somebody? Here, you can take my firstborn son or you can take my boat. Take your pick. I mean, it's a pretty big offer to say, go ahead and take my boat. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't feel right. But I appreciate it when people say that. But anyway, it was almost dead calm. There was not a cloud in the sky. It was low 80s as I left my slip. I ran the boat across Saginaw Bay over to Linwood Beach Marina to get it stored for the winter, winterized, put away. And what a beautiful run it was. It made me, I will be tempted. I did want to veer to the right and head off into my beloved Skinny Water and pull a few crankbaits, but I just didn't have time. And the reason I did it now is next week or this week coming up, I have to double up on shows to cover for my Ohio bow hunt coming up in the middle of the month. So I knew that my window of opportunity time-wise was getting short. And when I saw the weather opportunity, the weather window, I just couldn't pass it up. So the boat is now over at Linwood Beach. She is in their hands. I miss her already, although I haven't been out there for a long time. I did take advantage of the opener last weekend to go hunting. Now, it was hot. It was like low 80s. I wasn't going to go out because it was so hot. But my grandson, my 21-year-old grandson, Trent, says, hey, Grandpa, I'm going to hunt opening night. You want to go out there with me? Well, yeah. When your 21-year-old grandson says, Grandpa, you want to go hunt with me? I don't care if it would have been 90 degrees. I was going to go. And we did. We hunted the same piece of property. He was in a stand that was probably 300 yards from where I was. He didn't see anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't expect we would, but that was okay. Though we didn't talk while we were in the stand, except for some occasional text back and forth, we had a chance to talk in the truck on the way out there. We had a chance to talk in the truck on the way back. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. When I get a chance to hunt with my grandkids or fish with my grandkids, I'm going to absolutely take advantage of that, regardless of what the conditions are. Because it was so hot, we had our thermocells with us. I have used thermocells for bear hunting before, and I'll tell you right now, I have no business relationship with Thermacell. I wish I did. I didn't know anything about these products until the guys, and this is several years ago now, the guys at Hunter Safety System said, Mike, you got to try these things out. They're the real deal. So I trust the guys from Hunter Safety System. If they vouched for it, I went out and I bought one. Oh, my word. These things are incredible. I was sitting in an old box blind opening evening, and the mosquitoes were swarming me on the way out there. I sat in the blind, and they swarmed me. I fired up that Thermacell, and within a couple of minutes, they were leaving me alone. I could see them leaving the blind. And when I hunt in a portable pop-up blind up in Ontario or the UP, where the bugs are just absolutely terrible, you can see the mosquitoes fly to the window, they get that scent, and they turn around and leave. I mean, they are lifesavers. People say, do they scare deer away? I don't have a sense for that. I can tell you that bears are not scared by a Thermacell. I have seen bears walk through Thermacell smoke to get to a bait site. It doesn't seem to bother bears at all. Does it bother deer? Probably, possibly. But when you're faced with the choice of, okay, am I going to hunt this night with a Thermacell or just not go out there? I'm going to take the Thermacell. What else? Oh, also this week, I struggle with this a little bit because I know, I like the phrase that the internet is not a real place, and I get that. But because I do a fair amount of my work, my business, my communication online through social media outlets, I do run into this more than probably just the casual person who's surfing the web. And we've had several situations in the last week with anti-hunters. Now, I welcome a conversation with a non-hunter, either in person or online. I welcome those conversations because if you take somebody who is a non-hunter only because they don't know about it or have never been exposed to it, that person can be swayed, or at least swayed to the point, if they don't pick up a bow or a gun, they will at least accept what it is that we do because they now have some knowledge of it. I welcome those conversations. The way I look at the world is, you've got 10% on the right side, whatever side it is. I'll say on one side, us, hardcore hunters and anglers. You've got 10% on the other end of the spectrum. There are absolute, vehement, hardcore antis. And then you've got the 80% of the population in the middle that are either casual participants or they're non-participants, but they're not against it. They're not antis. So that 80% of people in the middle, I will welcome a conversation with them anytime. That 10% on the other end, I don't mean to sound harsh. I don't mean to sound like a jerk. But I'm telling you right now, I have no use for their way of thinking. None. Because these aren't people who will post, well, you know, why do you hunt that bear? I think they're beautiful. I can deal with that kind of a comment. There's an answer to that. The comments that say, you're barbarian, you should have turned that gun on yourself and pulled the trigger. That's the kind of stuff that I have no use for, and that's the kind of stuff that really bothers me. We, as hardcore hunters and anglers, we just want to go about our way of life. We want to do what we do. We are not trying to impose our way of life on others. But the antis don't feel that way. They think what we're doing is evil and wrong, but they want to impose those thoughts and their laws on us. And I can't stand it. So that's my way of getting into the guest after the break. Justin Tomei shot a beautiful bear hunting in the UP, and it was his pictures that really somehow got the attention of the anti. So we'll talk with Justin about that and his role as policy coordinator at MUCC, and then Karl Ieuter of the Ieuter Insurance Group. We got a good show coming up this week. Great guests, lots of good topics. I'm glad you're with us right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show on more than 30 stations across the great state of Michigan. And they include WZTK in Alpena, that's 105.7 FM. You can hear us in Sandusky on WMIC, 660 AM, 95.3 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Marquette on WDMJ, 1320 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Boning Archery. Michigan-based Boning has been a leader in the archery industry, for more than 3/4 of a century. The company started with a product called Ferrultite to glue broadheads to wood and aluminum arrow shafts. These days, you look at where Boning is, the products they put out there, both for target archers and for bow hunters. As you are in the woods this fall or on the target range, I bet you have some Boning products on your rig. If you don't, please check them out. The website, boning.com, B-O-H-N-I-N-G, boning.com. I was talking in the first segment about a post that I put on my Facebook page earlier in the week. It was a big, beautiful UP bear taken by Justin Tomei. Now, Justin has been on the show before because he's the policy guy for MUCC, and he joins us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line once again. Justin, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, congrats on that bear. That was a beautiful bear. Tell me the story.
I have to start the story with I'm obscenely lucky, apparently, for bear hunting anyways. And it starts, I'm obscenely lucky because I have a cool job. I'm obscenely lucky because then I get to meet cool people, and that's what happened here is I got to know some of the bear guys. And so I called Joe Hudson and he was like, hey, I'm putting in for a bear this year. He goes, let me know if you draw. Called him, I drew, went up there, and, I took the whole week off. He goes, give me a week, I'll get you a nice bear. I'm like, all right, I'll give you 9 days. We were done in 3 hours.
Oh.
Yeah, his group, his dogs, they did a fantastic job on this bear. I mean, the story the next day would be more entertaining because we were chasing this bear for 4 hours through beaver ponds and catching the dogs and cutting them back in. But, we put the dogs out, and they treed this beautiful bear after 40 minutes, an hour or something, a few hundred yards from the road in the swamp. And we walked down there, and they kind of helped me through the process because it was my first bear hunt, too. And, we put him on the ground, and at that point, I turned to Joe, and Joe looks at me, and he goes, you will never kill another bear like that in your life. And then we lifted the front shoulder up, and we saw that big white blaze that you can see in that picture. And I just looked at him and I said some words you can't say on the radio, but then I said, this bear was a rug until this moment, and now I have to mount it because it was so unique. I mean, I don't know a lot about bears, but I knew it was special at that point, and so we got him out. So yeah, I mean, it was my first time hunting dogs. I had done some training period with some people in the lower, and I don't know, I kind of fell in love with it. It reminded me a lot of how I turkey hunt, driving around big timber looking for tracks, and it was just a great time. So I stayed up there, hunted another day with Joe and them, trying to get another guy a bear, and then they gave the dogs a day off, and I headed home from the UP and went back to work.
Wow. Yeah, you can't take that blaze and split it and make a rug out of it, that's for sure.
No.
And before we go too far, we're talking about a rug or a mount. You're also going to eat that bear too, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can't wait to get my meat back. So the meat's ready. I just don't have time to make the 13-hour round trip to go get it. So I'm waiting until a buddy of my dad's goes up there, where we stayed at their camp called Camp Woolrich, which is 10 minutes from where we were hunting. And so my dad and some friends came up and, hung out at camp. So when he goes up deer hunting this weekend, he's going to come back with my meat.
Excellent. Hey, what did you think of the? Well, I love bear meat, but I love bear burger and I love bear brats. Like a steak or a roast, not so much. But man, bear brats on the grill are some of the best wild game I've ever had. Mm-hmm. What did you think of the process of? And I realize you don't have a lot to compare it with as far as bear hunting, but the hunting with dogs, hunting with hounds. How was that for you?
So it was nothing I ever imagined myself doing. So I always wanted my first bear to be at our old cabin I grew up on with a bow over bait. And as I got to know people through work, I wanted to try something new. And I mentioned earlier, it was a lot like turkey hunting the first time I went out during the training period. We're cruising back roads looking for tracks instead of, bear tracks instead of birds. And the other thing I really liked about it is I always say it about deer hunting too, that hunting's a team sport. And hunting with hounds, epitomized that in a way I never imagined. So we had two trucks of dogs driving around when I had my kill tag. The next day we had two trucks driving around, helping out the other guy. But by the time we got my bear out of the woods, there were 9 trucks there. People heard that there was a nice bear on the ground, and as we were dragging it out of the swamp, people that I'd never met are walking in to come help us drag it out. And for me, I have a pretty idealistic view of hunting generally, and that was very special to me. I mean, hunting with the dogs too, traditional hunting heritage, things like that, that's all great. But for me, what really sold it was the camaraderie and kind of the team sport of it, where it was everybody's bear. We all took pictures with it. There's group photos of us all.
When you say a big bear, I mean, that was over 300 pounds dressed. It was a big bear with the most beautiful white V blaze on the chest. I mean, it was absolutely a beautiful animal. I want to follow up on this, though. You say you have an idealistic perception or image of hunting. What do you mean by that, Justin?
So I have a 4-year-old daughter, and if you ask her why we hunt, she'll tell you to spend time with friends and family, number one, and for food, number two. And growing up at our cabin, sometime my grandpa lived in Pennsylvania for a lot of my life. And when I would see him, the only time a year I'd see him would be at deer camp. He'd come up and spend a couple weeks at deer camp. So for me, it's a big thing to spend time with your friends and family when you're in the woods. And I'm going to deer camp with a few of my buddies this weekend. We go a few weekends a year every year, just the 3 of us. And we hang out and drink a few beers and try and get some deer. And if I get a deer, cool. For me, I hunt for food more than anything. I wouldn't say that I'm a trophy hunter. My number one priority is put meat in the fridge, and so I love trying to shoot does, especially in ag land in southern Michigan. So when I say I'm idealistic, it's about those intangible things for hunting for me and my family.
It's interesting that a guy who obviously loves hunting so much now finds yourself in a job at MUCC in the position you're at. Tell me about that.
It's a dream come true. So I spent most of my adult life in campaign politics, actually running election campaigns. And I got kind of disenfranchised, but I also had a young family, and working 80 hours a week, 6 months a year was not conducive to having a family. And when I found this job, I could talk about woods and water and hunting, fish, and trapping all day, every day, and someone's paying me to do it. I just don't know how I could have a better job than I do.
The people. So are you a lobbyist for MUCC? I know you're like the policy guy, but does that mean basically you're a lobbyist?
I am. We have 2 registered lobbyists on staff, Amy and myself. I'm the only one that does it full time. So I go to the legislature regularly. You see me covered in bear blood in that picture, but I'm in a suit 2-3 days a week down in Lansing. And Amy and I kind of act as subject matter experts when legislators need to know information on these natural resources and conservation issues.
The legislators that you're working with, are they knowledgeable, or or when you walk in the door, are you working with a blank slate because they have no idea about these hunting and fishing issues?
I'm going to avoid getting as political as I can. When the Republicans were in charge, a lot more of them hunted and fished, right? So a lot of these Democrats that are in charge now, they are a blank slate. I will also say on most hunting issues, they've been largely receptive. Their priorities may differ from what the Republicans have in the past in far of natural resources and conservation issues, but we're actually getting a lot of good work done with them. So it has been a blank slate. One of the senators on the Natural Resources Committee, and one of the first Natural Resources Committee meetings I went to this year, was asking questions and said, you have to forgive me, I'm incredibly naive on these issues, I just don't know. And at the end, I handed her my card and I said, I just want you to think of us as a resource. If you have a question, please call me. There are a few champions of hunting, trapping, fishing, conservation in the Democratic Party, and they are knowledgeable and they are willing to go to bat for us within their own caucus when they have to. So it is a blank slate. I have found I don't want to say it's not non-existent, but I've found very little animosity towards conservation and in the outdoor world generally. It's been kind of refreshing to help teach these people as they're learning these issues for the first time.
I'll take a blank slate. I will take that anytime, because if somebody is just uneducated or they don't have a background in hunting and fishing and shooting and trapping, that's fine. It just means they grew up differently than I did. As long as they're willing to listen to what we have to say and not try to take our way of life away from us, I'm okay with that. I suspect you are as well.
Yeah, that same senator in a recent committee meeting said something, was asking questions. I'm sorry if this is a dumb question. And in my mind, there's no such thing as a dumb question that's asked in good faith. That's the case. If somebody's willing to learn and be an adult about it, I'm very glad to sit down and have conversations. Sometimes they end up being tough conversations, but that's okay because they're trying to help in good faith, and that's what matters.
Okay, so let's take your experiences in Lansing and beyond with politicians trying to promote hunting and fishing and shooting and trapping to the reaction your picture got online. I don't know how it ended up where it did, but obviously it got passed around in some pretty hardcore circles, and you took a lot of heat.
I didn't even know about it. So I don't have social media. I have one for work, and that's it. So I woke up one morning to get ready for my work, and my wife's like, I went down a rabbit hole last night. I'm like, what? I got up to let the dog out, and I saw your picture on Facebook, and I started reading the comments, and she was mad. She was beet red mad. One person went through and disliked everything, and then she was reading the comments, and I found a couple people you talked about on the behind the mic where they were saying that they wish the bear would have got me instead. And I texted you about it. I'm, as far as I'm concerned, the internet's not a real place. These aren't real people in the sense that I'm never going to interact with them in any meaningful way outside of this. And so it doesn't bother me a lot. What bothers me is just the willful ignorance of people, just assuming that the meat's not going to get eaten, assuming that I just left that bear in the woods or that I only took it to wrap the hide around some foam and hang it up on my wall. And the willful ignorance of people is what really gets me more than the vileness of them. Because as far as I'm concerned, those aren't real people. It's not a real place. Willful
ignorance. Hang tight, Justin. We got to take a break here at the Outdoor Magazine Show. Willful ignorance. That's an interesting and kind of in some ways, a wonderful term, and it'll allow us to talk more about this after the break. We're talking with Justin Tomei of MUCC, MUCC.org. He's also a hardcore hunter, talking about this whole concept of why some of the hardcore antis appear to hate our way of life as vehemently as they do. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Battle Creek on WBCK 95.3 FM. You can hear us in St. Joe on WSJM 94.9 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Newberry, WNBY 1450 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by VersaSkins, Michigan-based VersaSkins. Just change your skin for the season you're in. Why would you want to order or buy a bunch of different sets of hunting clothes when you can buy one good quality set and then snap on and zip on an outer shell of a different camo pattern? It's a genius idea. I'm surprised somebody didn't think of it before Paul Perrone came up with it, but he did. And if you want to learn more, check him out online at versaskins.com. That's versaskins.com. And if you need big sizes, I'm talking 4, 5, 6X, I know those sizes are hard to get. Well, the folks at VersaSkins can help you out. Go to the website, versaskins.com. That's versaskins.com. Talking right now with a guy who I consider to be a very, very interesting guy. His name is Justin Tomei. He's a lobbyist, a policy expert for MUCC, MUCC.org. Now, I'm a big fan of MUCC. I think they're doing great work. Justin is also a hardcore outdoorsman, a hardcore hunter. He was on a bear hunt in the UP. He shot a big, beautiful bear with a beautiful blaze. I posted it on my Facebook page, and it got a lot of good, positive comments. But also, it got a lot, and you can't see them now because, to be honest with you, I went through and deleted a lot of those comments and banned those people from my page because I don't want them. I don't want them on my page. I don't want somebody on my page, my social media outlets, who is, as Justin says, willfully ignorant to the concept of hunting. When they come around and say, why did you kill that poor bear? I wish the bear would have killed you. I don't want to be around that type of thinking. But, Justin, in today's world, that type of thinking is out there. In your educated and experienced opinion, how do we deal with that?
First of all, I got to say, I'm not an expert on anything. Amy's the expert. I know enough to be dangerous. How do we deal with it?
I will tell you, let me just stop you right there. When people tell me they're not an expert in anything, they get my respect, because all too often in today's world, people claim to be experts and they aren't. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you got to know what you know and know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I know what I need to I hope, effectively do my job. But how do we deal with these people? You know, I take it a step further than saying that they're anti-hunting. I say they're anti-conservation, because not only do they not like hunting, that's part of it. They kind of reject the North American model of wildlife conservation outright, reject the science, the biology of it. You can be anti-hunting, but still kind of get it. And I use my sisters as an example. They will never pull the trigger on an animal. I show them a picture of a deer I killed, and they're like, ew, or poor deer. But at the end of the day, I also shoot them a deer as often as I can and give them the meat, and they eat it because they understand how it works. And so they're anti-hunting in that sense, but they understand the conservation aspect of it. As far as how you deal with them, it's so hard. And I used willful ignorance before the end of the last segment, and I say that because they're so rigid in their beliefs that they don't want to know. They don't want to try and understand. They just immediately say, this thing is bad to me, no matter what I learn. And that rigidity, I don't know how you break through it, because no matter what you're going to do, they're going to be like a toddler and stick their fingers in their ears and go, no. I don't want to hear it. And so I think what you do is you just try and talk to the people that want to have those conversations in good faith, like we talked about. And if you can change those people's mind, or, you know, at least make them understand, like my sisters, then you're going to get a lot more ground, and you're not just going to be beating your head against the wall. You know, Michigan Wildlife Council did some research a couple years ago. 92% of Michiganders support legal regulated fishing, 84% legal regulated hunting. We have very good support in the state. We are an outdoor state. So you just kind of got to let them live in their echo chamber as long as they want to. And if they come out, then you reach out your hand and try and teach them.
Teaching. Yeah, the vast majority of Michigan residents who are non-participants, who can be taught, absolutely. Let's reach out to those people. Let's try to teach them. Let's try to educate them, because they will have a civil conversation. It's that hardcore percentage on the other end of the spectrum that drives me crazy because we're never going to change, and they're never going to change. But Justin, the difference is we don't try to impose our will on them, yet they try to impose their will on us. And that's what gets my ire up, because if they get enough traction, because they have more money than God, if they get enough traction, they can affect what we do.
Yeah, look at doves or the wolves.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. But we're not trying to pass any laws that say you have to go hunting. No, I'll say the people that I've known that were non-consumptive users before that tried hunting, they fell in love with it. And a great example is Representative Amos O'Neill. He represents Saginaw area. Late in life hunter. He shot his first turkey this spring, and he was at one of our Sportsman's Caucus breakfasts, literally dancing with excitement, telling the story because he tried this new thing and he fell in love with it. And I texted him pictures of my bear after I shot it. He was enamored with it. Now I'm going duck hunting with him in a few weeks.
Nice.
So the people that try it with an open mind, a lot of times, maybe they realize it's not for them, and that's fine, but they get it. And
Justin, listen, you and I could have this conversation for the next hour, and I would enjoy every minute of it. However, I am out of time. I appreciate you joining me this week. I appreciate your insight. Keep up the good work at MUCC, and I look for the opportunity to talk with you again very soon.
Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
All right, Justin Tomei of MUCC, MUCC.org. Very interesting guy and an interesting perspective, and I appreciate that. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, Karl Ieuter of the Ieuter Insurance Group. How do you insure all these hunting and fishing toys we have? Well, Karl has the answer coming up. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine Show in Carroll on WKYO 1360 AM and WIDL 92.1 FM. You can hear us in Sheboygan on Big Country Gold WCBY 1240 AM 100.7 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge. Let's go to the Sioux. News Talk 1400 WKNW. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by the Linwood Beach Marina and Campground. Linwood Beach can be your year-round Saginaw Bay fishing destination and your mid-Michigan tracker and polar craft and Angler Quest headquarters. You know I love that. For more info, check them out online at linwoodbeachmarina.com. That's linwoodbeachmarina.com. I was at Linwood Beach this past week. I took my Angler Quest and I ran it from my slip at the mouth of the Saginaw River over to Linwood Beach to have the boat put to sleep for the winter. Now, not permanently, just for the winter. And I realized as I was taking my gear off that boat how much gear I have. I mean, a truckload. Baits, rods, reels, life jackets. And that was just off my boat. And I got thinking, oh my gosh, I've got a gun safe full of guns. I've got all kinds of bow hunting equipment. What would happen if, God forbid, a disaster happened and I lost that gear? Could I replace it? How would I replace it? And I thought, why am I worried about this? Because the folks at Ieuter, I've been working with the folks at Ieuter Insurance in Midland for a long, long time now. Their website, Ieuter.com, IEUTER.com. They have walked me through this. They have guided me through this. And Karl Ieuter's with us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line to help guide the rest of us through this as well. Karl, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How is your early fall going? Have you had a chance to get out and do anything fun yet?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the lake quite a bit. With this warm weather, I can't believe it's already fall.
I know it doesn't feel like fall, but you and I have talked about this before. But remind me, Karl, what is the best way to inventory and insure all of these toys that we have?
Yeah, the best way is definitely to talk to your insurance agent because every insurance company is a little bit different. But for inventory, we all have those cell phones. It's so easy. Make sure you take a video of everything you own. So if you do have a loss, you can remember what you had. And then you want to get with your insurance agent and give them a schedule of all your equipment, your guns, your rods, your poles, everything, and with values and serial numbers if you have them. So if there's a loss, you want to talk to your agent and make sure that they have them properly covered.
Oh, man.
And a lot of insurance policies, I mean, just about every insurance policy, theft of guns is limited to either $0 or like $1,500. And I know a lot of your listeners out there have a lot more than $1,500 worth of guns. So you definitely want to schedule it on your insurance policy. And when I say schedule, you want to list it specifically with a value on it.
Yeah, $1,500. That you could have one good upland shotgun.
Right.
Worth more than that.
And it's really not expensive to schedule it on your insurance policy. And, a lot of the hunters say, oh, I have it all in the, safes, and they're fine there. But when you're at deer camp and you have them in the back of your car, if something happens there, things can happen anywhere. So it's really better to be safe than sorry, and talk to your agent about scheduling on your insurance policy.
I'm thinking I missed a wonderful opportunity. When I had all of my gear off the boat sitting in the back of my truck, I should have done just what you suggested, taken pictures, shot video of it. Because even now, and it's just been a few days, if I go back in my mind and try to say, okay, what exactly did I take off that boat? I couldn't come up with everything.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to remember, and it's so easy nowadays with our phones just to take a little video.
So when we insure these, do we insure them for what we paid for them or what it would cost to replace them?
Normally, again, it depends on the insurance policy, but we insure what it would cost to replace them. So you want to say what the value would be to replace it.
And isn't most of this stuff covered under our homeowners anyway? Or is that what we're talking about? It is under our homeowners with a specific list of what we have.
Some is covered under your homeowners under contents. Some have like a restriction of how much contents off premise are covered. And then some have, the exclusions like from theft or mysterious disappearance. So that's why it's really better to get with your agent and, depending on what insurance company they have you with, to make sure that you have your gear covered properly so there's no surprises.
And speaking of agents, I find it pretty cool that you guys there at Ieuter, you love to work with companies that are outdoor related. I mean, fishing guides, shooting ranges, hunting guides, that type of thing. That's a niche that you really like.
Absolutely, yes. We have specialty insurance companies that just write the guides, outfitters out there at the ranges. If you have, any of those exposures, we'd love to help you.
And folks can find out more about that at the website, Ieuter.com, Ieuter.com, Ieuter, Ieuter.com. Thanks, Karl. We'll talk again.
All right, thank you.
Karl Ieuter of the Ieuter Insurance Group talking about how to protect. We got a lot of money into this stuff. I know you don't want to think about it, and you maybe don't want your certain significant other to know how much you've got into this stuff, but we know, and the best way to protect it is to insure it. And I like the guys at Ieuter. Ieuter.com, Ieuter.com. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, Nick Grillo of Michigan Brand Meats. Now, I had somebody else scheduled for that slot. They had a family emergency, but Nick Grillo agreed to jump in at the last minute. I appreciate that. And also Chad Steward of the DNR talking about deer hunting and answering this week's Ask Avery question coming up in hour 2 of Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Ieuter Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polar Craft Boats, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Offshore Tackle, Garber Chevrolet, Rapid River Knife Works, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to hour number 2 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show here on the Outdoor Magazine radio network on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan. Why do I continue to make that distinction? Why do I every week consistently say this is a radio show? First and foremost, it's a radio show. It is recorded, produced, scheduled, syndicated, distributed as a 3-hour weekly radio show on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan. Why do I keep talking about that? To make the distinction, well, number one, there aren't many syndicated Michigan-based outdoor radio shows. So I'm kind of proud of that. You know, you're not supposed to be prideful, and I apologize, but I'm kind of proud of what we have been able to accomplish and put together over all these years. Also, I want to make the distinction between this radio show and podcast. Podcasting is one of the most ubiquitous terms out there today. Everybody has a podcast. There's even commercials. There's a podcast for that. There's a podcast for everything. And everybody has a podcast. And some of them are really, really good. Really, really good. But I like to make the distinction that this is a radio show. And if you hear it on your local radio station, you're hearing a radio show. You're not hearing a podcast. And I suggest the best way to listen to the content of this show, if you can, is on your local radio station. If for no other reason than your local radio station gets the content of the show before the podcast version is uploaded. So I'm a big fan of radio. I'm also a big fan of podcasting. And because I think it is such a big, hot thing these days, I also make a podcast version of the radio show available. And let me tell you something. There's been a podcast version of this radio show available for a long, long time, before a lot of people even heard the term podcasting. You can hear the podcast version of the radio show on my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com, on my Facebook page, on Amazon Music, Audible, Twitter, LinkedIn, Apple Music, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Player FM, Deezer, Odyssey, YouTube. I guess Twitter's now called X, isn't it? And because I do like podcasting, I also produce a monthly podcast for some of my advertising partners, including Offshore Tackle, Angler Quest Boats, Primal Outdoors, and Polar Craft Boats. And when we're done here in the studio today, we will record this month's Offshore Tackle podcast as well. So keep an ear out for that. Regardless, though, of when you are hearing my voice, how you are hearing my voice, where you are hearing my voice, thank you. Would not be able to do this without your support, and I truly appreciate the fact that you have allowed me to do this in some form or another for so many years. I love to work with Michigan-based family-owned companies. I make no secret of that. I make no excuses for that at all. And I had somebody scheduled for this segment, and unfortunately, they had a family emergency, and they were not available. And I thought, okay, this would be a great opportunity to get Nick Grillo of Michigan Brand Meats on the show, because I've been wanting to talk to Nick for the last several weeks, and he was able to change his schedule around and make this happen. And Nick Grillo, I appreciate your flexibility, and I appreciate you joining us on this hour of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show.
No problem at all, Mike. How's it going today?
Well, as we are recording this midweek, it feels like it's going to be the last really warm summer-like day, and then the temperatures are going to get a little more fall-like, I think, huh?
Yeah, I'm getting excited for that. I keep watching for which day it's finally going to turn, and looks like it's finally going to get here. And even like the 10 to 15-day forecast, I don't think there's a day that's going to hit above like 66 or something. So.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. But you haven't let these warm temps keep you from enjoying the outdoors. I mean, you're an avid outdoorsman, right? A hardcore hunter and angler, Nick.
Yep. I've been taking, full advantage of, the time of the year, and I've been on the Salmon River a lot this last, month. I've done a little bit of jigging. We hauled our boat up there and did some jigging, and been fishing a lot this fall, if you want to call it. But this September, we've been fishing with Paul over at Riverside, like obviously, and been doing really good on the Kings on the Manistee River. I tell you what, if anybody wants to experience that, Paul has that dialed down like crazy. I mean, we had days we had over 20 hookups. It was amazing.
Oh, man. Well, and let's talk more about that. Honestly, let's see, have I done it yet? I think I may have done it with Tim Roller years and years and years ago, but it's nothing I've done recently. I did get an invitation from from Tim. I couldn't take him up on last week, but this whole concept of casting crankbaits to giant king salmon in the rivers sounds like a riot. Tell me more about it.
That's my favorite part. I mean, it's obviously fun to catch them anyway, but to catch them on casting stick baits like that and just having them drill the sticks is amazing. And obviously you don't get as many hookups and bites as you do with floating bobbers for skein or eggs or anything, but man, just so fun. You cast, you know, how Paul likes to do it is you sit next to the current or next to the hole, and then you cast into the current and you do a slow retrieve. And man, when those fish are fired up, you know it, because you'll get multiple bites in, you know, 5-10 casts or whatever. It's amazing.
Well, it's not like, you know, in summertime when you and I are out on Saginaw Bay and we're watching our offshore boards going, is that a fish? Is that a fish? When you get a bite on a crankbait and a king in the river, I bet you know right away it's a fish.
Exactly, yep. There's a couple times you might tap on the bottom, you know, hit a rock or bump over a log, or even if your line, maybe like a fish runs across your line or whatever, and you feel that little tap and you're kind of saying, huh, what was that, you know? But yeah, exactly. When something like a big king, you know, you get a 20-pound king that just drills it, you better have that rod in your hand. And we actually took my nephew, you know, Joseph, you know, little Joe.
Little Joe, yeah.
We took him for the first year on the river, and he really wanted to cast and feel that bite. And we said, man, you know, maybe in a couple years when you hit 12, 14 years old, because right now, if you're not ready, that king is going to yank that rod right out of your hand. But he got to fight them, and he caught a couple himself once they got hooked up, and he did awesome. But yeah, that's really kind of my favorite fishing, I think, overall, is casting for those kings in the fall here. It's amazing. And I listened to your show, what I think was 3 weeks ago when you had Tim on. Mm-hmm. And so I did ask Paul about that, and he showed me the exact spot where that world record brown was caught, and told me a little bit about that story. And it's kind of cool to say, dude, we fished there multiple times, and it's like I didn't even realize that. I knew kind of it was right around that area, but to know that that was the exact hole, it's like, that's amazing. It was really cool.
Well, and another cool side note on that story is I had called Paul Schlafly of Riverside Charters, the Paul we're talking about, and I said, Paul, can you join me on the radio show tomorrow? And he said, Mike, I'd be happy to. He said, but he said, you might want to check with your buddy Tim Roller, because he just caught a huge brown. And I hadn't had a chance to hear from Tim yet. So it was actually Paul who told me about Tim and got me going down that story. So that was very, very cool. I also saw some cool video online of you guys bobber fishing too for kings, right?
And yep. Now, obviously, I'm sure most charters are like this, but especially Paul. He wants to have the most opportunity for you to catch fish, obviously. So you could sit there all day casting the sticks and having a fun time, but eventually the bite does slow down with those, you know, mostly the morning, first thing when they're fired up and everything. So after the sun gets up and after a few hours, that stick bite slows down. So then he switches to floating bobbers with skein and with salmon eggs. And that's pretty fun, too, because, you know, you're just floating a bobber down the river. So it's like you wouldn't kind of think of that for king salmon fishing for this big 15 to 20, 25-pound fish, but you're just floating a bobber down and waiting for that bobber to go down, and then you set that hook right away. And you get a lot of hookups and bites that way because you're floating through these holes that, I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but some of these holes have 50 to 100 kings laying in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just see them swirling all over in the morning when they're surfacing and they're rolling and they're porpoising. But yeah, so you just float through, and you might have them just kind of nibbling on the eggs as they float by, or sometimes you have them where they just grab them and swallow them, and they're no-brainers where the bobber just gets sinked down, and you set that hook, and instantly, you know, you're fighting a big 25-pound king. It's amazing.
Could little Joe have the rod in his hand for that, or did you have to hand him the rod after a hookup then, too?
He did with that, yeah, and it took him a little while to understand how hard you have to set the hook when that bobber went down, you know, because we've taken him bobber fishing for bluegills and taken him bass fishing and stuff, and he's having so much fun with that. But it's like he just does like this little jerk, like he's, fishing for perch and stuff. And it's like, man, you got to set this sucker, And so he got the hang of it, and he actually did set a couple on that.
Nice.
And then
hang tight, Nick. Listen, sorry to interrupt you, but we got a lot more time to talk. We're talking with Nick Grillo of Michigan Brand Meats, the website michiganbrand.net, michiganbrand.net. When we come back, I want to talk to Nick a little bit about his early fall bow hunting, and then we'll turn to the topic of Michigan Brand Meats and how they can help you out, not just with their snack sticks like the Mike Avery Hunter Sticks, but also if you want to get a deer or other wild game done, Michigan Brand can help you out there with some caveats we'll discuss after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Flint on Sports Extra 1330 WTRX. You can hear us in Houghton Lake on the Twister 92.1 WTWS. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Iron Mountain on WMIQ 1450 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Killer Food Plots. Killer Food Plots can help you improve the habitat on your property to attract and hold wildlife. Now, we're talking about whitetails, right? But when you put in food plots, you're also attracting turkeys and you're helping all the other wildlife out there. For my money, I think Killer Food Plots is one of the best out there. Michigan-based, family-owned Killer Food Plots. Rich Krazan, the guy behind the company these days, very hardworking, very conscientious, very dedicated. You can learn more on his website, killerfoodplots.com. That's killerfoodplots.com. We're talking with Nick Grillo of Michigan Brand Meats, michiganbrand.net. And Nick, behind your place, you put in some food plots this year. How'd they turn out? Are they holding deer? Have you had any luck?
Yeah, the food plots have gone pretty good. It's having a little issue with it being spotty. We had a little lack of rain these last 3 or 4 weeks or so, and so, I put down some urethra and some fertilizer and stuff to give it some boost, and it's still going pretty good. I got a couple of brassicas where I got turnips and radishes coming up, and those don't really get hit hard until we get a frost and everything. But yeah, I can't complain really. Deer are in it every night. I got a couple cell cams, so I'm kind of just watching that right now while the weather's like this and waiting for this cold front like we're talking about.
Yeah, and again, as we're recording this, the cold front hasn't come through, but did you make it out last weekend, the bow opener? Did you make it out?
I did, yep, just for the morning sit, actually. I skipped the afternoon hunt, and I did see a little buck and a couple of does, so it was just great to be out again. And like I said, this week with that warm weather, like you said, now that it's recording right now, we're still sitting in 84-degree weather. Yeah. I'm just waiting for this to cool down a little bit.
Well, let's talk about your company, your family company, Michigan Brand Meats. I love the fact that you are Michigan-based. I love the fact that you're family-owned. Tell me a little bit about the history of you guys.
Yeah, obviously, like you mentioned, we're a family-owned company here in mid-Michigan. We have 2 locations, one in Bay City and one in Frankenmuth. Now, we don't have a retail store, but we have the plants where we produce the product. So we get in the raw meat, we cut it, we marinate it, we smoke it, we package it, we ship it right out the doors. We do all that in-house. Like we did mention, we're a family-owned company, but we have over 200 employees right now, just a little over 200. So it's obviously not just us. We have so many good employees that are helping us succeed right now. We're a third-generation family. My grandpa and grandma started this company when they were in the early 80s. In 1994, my dad switched the name to Michigan Brand, and he had a vision of jerky kind of taking off. And that is when Michigan Brand did really kind of get on the map good and start taking off, was these jerky sales across the state. Now, we still have the ham recipes that my grandpa had from the 80s. And I, don't like to brag, but I think you can attest to how good that ham recipe is.
Every holiday at the Avery house, there's a Michigan Brand ham.
There you go. Yep. And that's a tradition for a lot of families. And you start to see it a lot these days, where a lot of people aren't having the family sit-down dinners like you used to have, you know. But especially around the holiday times, a ham or a turkey is still, you know, a tradition for a lot of people.
You said now there is no retail store for Michigan brand meats. However, you do have product in retail locations, hundreds across the state.
Correct. Yep. Like you just mentioned, it's all across the state. I mean, we actually just hit it last month. We're a little over 500 now, so we hit 500 locations just for our Michigan brand product across the state. And I mean, obviously we can't hit every single little town across the whole state, but we're all over. I mean, we've really expanded the west side of the state these last 3-4 years. And one of our big accounts that we just got last year is the J&H Convenience Family Stores. Now, they're a gas station chain, and we have over 35 locations. And they're on the west side, anywhere from south of Grand Rapids all the way up to Manistee. I mean, every exit, there's a gas station there that is a J&H, so it's a very popular store. All the way up to Traverse City, you know, we have Roy's General Store in Shady Lane. We have a couple other. As you know, we have UP. We obviously have the 75 hit awesome every exit going north. So, yep, we have a lot of locations.
People say, well, how do I know? If you go to your website, which is michiganbrand.net, there's a store locator button right on the website. You can click that, put in, I think it's your zip code, and it'll tell you what's nearby, right?
Exactly. You can set it to however mile radius you want, 20, 30, 40, 50, and you can see how many locations are within that zip code. So exactly. And then if all else fails, or you just don't feel like leaving the house, we have our online store where we'll ship the product directly to you. So that's right on that website as well.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. I think there's a way to save a couple bucks too, right?
There is, yep. We love, obviously, being partners with you and being friendship. And obviously, your listeners have been a great customer base for us that we said, you know what, we got to reward the Mike Avery customers as well. So we have a promo code right on the website. And all you have to enter at checkout is Mike20, just one word, Mike20, and you'll save 20% off your whole order. It's not just a single product. It's not specific products. You can buy as many products as you want, and you'll get 20% off that whole order.
Mike20, where will you ship? Will you ship anywhere in the state? Will you ship out of the state?
Yep, anywhere. We actually, I had an order last night for Maryland, and we're going to ship that out today because that will get there by Friday. We've done California. We've done Florida, Louisiana. We've done all the southern states. So, yes, we'll ship all over. Pretty much anywhere in Michigan, it's a one-day ship. So if you get it to us, you'll pretty much receive that product in a day or two. The only exception is if it's close to a weekend, like a Thursday or a Friday, we'll wait till the following Monday so that product won't sit on a truck all weekend.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the website, michiganbrand.net, click on the store locator button. If you order online, you put in the promo code Mike20. Very, very cool. And also, coming up here now, well, it's just around the corner after Halloween. I think we're going to kick off another Ham for the Holidays on our Wednesday Night Live right on through the first of the year, Nick.
Yes, sir. We're looking forward to that. We have such a good time doing that for Thanksgiving, holidays with Christmas, and then we do it in Easter as well. So, yep, we're looking forward to that again. Oh,
good. Well, before we run out of time, let's get to the topic that I actually originally wanted to get you on the show about, and that is how you can help out hunters. Say, I shoot a nice doe here, and I want to have it processed. Can I just drop it off at the back of Michigan Brand and you guys will take care of it, or how does this work?
Yep, so we do offer custom processing, which is what you're talking about right here. So it can be any wild game. It does not have to be deer. It can be bear if you shoot one in the UP. We've had people bring us caribou when they've been on caribou hunts. We've had elk. We've had everything from, anything you can think of. We've even had lion from Africa. We've had rattlesnake. We've had antelope. We've had many different kinds. But anyway, the one basically rule that you have to follow is we are a USDA inspected plant, so we are not allowed to have any whole carcass animals inside our plant. So you do have to have the meat boned out. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean you have to cut up the jerky yourself or separate it for jerky versus trim meat for sausage. You can literally take a big chunk right off the hindquarter or bone out the complete animal, throw it in a bag, and just bring it right to us that way. And then we'll do the rest as far as slicing it for jerky, separate it for sausage meat. And when you come in, we'll have the whole list in front of you. And you can say, I want all jerky. I want these flavors. You can say, I want half and half. We'll sit down with you and we'll go through that list, which is also on our website as well.
Nice. You know, I know you guys for hams. I love your hams. Is there such a thing as a venison ham? Can you do that?
Yeah, that's actually getting pretty popular. We've done that for years, and it's something we haven't really advertised that much, but there's some people that do it every year, and it really has taken off. So what that is you could bring in, it can be a shoulder. It doesn't have to be a hindquarter. But, for example, like that, you could take the deer's hindquarter, bring it into us, and we'll pump it with the same brine that we use for our hams, and then we'll smoke it for you, and we'll return it to you like that. So it's pretty amazing because it will be venison meat. It will still have that red, pinkish texture or look and color, but it tastes just like a ham because it's our ham brine.
Wow.
So a lot of people, what they do is they'll shoot a deer early season like this, and they'll bring us one. We'll smoke it for them, and then they'll take that to deer camp over rifle season, and they'll eat on that for 2-3 days, munching on it with their friends and family, and yeah, it's a big hit.
Oh, that sounds great. Also, you know, I've had you guys do my last several bears. I love your bear brats on the grill. They're outstanding. And we can't forget about, you know, your sticks, your jerkies. The Mike Avery Hunter Stick, the peppered elk. Nick, I love that. I appreciate you working with me on that. That's a pretty cool product, too.
It is, yep. And obviously with the custom, like we're kind of talking about, any questions, you guys can give us a call, 989-893-9589, or go right to our website. There's a way to contact us through there as well. But yeah, I mean, we're happy that hunting season's finally here, fall. We love summer, but man, there's nothing. I mean, this time of year, there's so much to do in Michigan, and we're just happy to be here.
MichiganBrand.net, MichiganBrand.net. Will you take these custom orders at both the Bay City and Frankenmuth plants?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. It is actually just at our Bay City facility. And like you mentioned, you just go right to the back door. There's a sign on the door, and you drive around the back. You back your truck right up. We have a scale right inside there, and like we mentioned, we'll walk through everything with you. And so even if you have a bunch of questions there when you're bringing the meat in, we'll go through everything. Nick
Grillo, always a pleasure to talk with you, my friend. I look forward to getting out in the woods or on the water soon. I'll send people to the website, MichiganBrand.net, MichiganBrand.net. Have a great fall, Nick. You and I will be talking, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate everything.
All right, we'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, Chad Steward from the DNR talking about deer hunting. He's the big game specialist for the DNR, so I'm sure he's got some thoughts on this season coming up, the season as it is so far, such as it is. And then we will also answer this week's Ask Avery segment about, is there a license, a permit to feed deer on your own property? Coming up right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Houghton Lake on 98.5 WUPS. You can hear us in Holland on WHTC 1450 AM, 99.7 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Escanaba on WCHT 600 AM, 95.3 FM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by... You know that sound. That's the sound of my Rapid River knife opening, the Rapid River knife that I always have in my pocket. Rapid River is a great company, Michigan-based, family-owned, making quality products, not just quality, I mean top quality products. This knife I have in my hand right here, it's guaranteed for life. If this knife breaks or even if I'm stupid and misuse it and I break the tip off because I'm using it as a screwdriver, if I go up there and tell Chris Durson, the owner of Rapid River, look, I screwed up and I'm honest with him, I'm straight with him, he'll replace the blade. In fact, I like these knives so much, I just bought one for my brother-in-law, Johnny, Uncle Johnny. He was over at the house I had it engraved with his name on it. He was over at the house. I said, Johnny, I got something for you. And he opened it. He said, I've been wanting one of these for the longest time. They make a great gift. I would recommend, if you can, go to the showroom on US 2 just east of Rapid River, and you'll see what I mean. If you can't make it to the showroom, go to the website, rapidriverknifeworks.us, rapidriverknifeworks.us, and you can order online. And again, they are a great gift for that. I'm not even going to mention it yet because it's too early to start thinking about it. I mean, I know the stores are, but I'm not going to. But you know that holiday at the end of the year that celebrates our Savior's birth? That one? I think I've narrowed it down. A great gift for that. RapidRiverKnifeWorks.us. Well, it is October. We're working through the month of October. As we are recording the show right now, it still feels like summer. But as I look at the forecast, by the time you hear the show this weekend, it's going to feel like fall. It's deer season. Have you been out yet? I made it out opening day just because I wanted to hunt with my grandson, but I will be back out here shortly. When I think about deer in Michigan, I think about a lot of things. I think about history. I think about tradition. I think about venison. But there's a name that also comes to mind, and it's Chad Steward. Chad is the big game specialist for the Michigan DNR. He is one of the guys. He's like the guy who you hear about when you hear about deer. And I think he's a good guy. I think he takes a lot of heat, but I think he's very honest and open when it comes to whitetail management. And he's with us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Chad, welcome back. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing good, but I want to just follow up on this. As in some ways the face of deer management for the DNR, you are very visible. Does that take its toll on you? Do you feel the criticisms, or do you just brush it off?
You definitely learn to grow some thicker skin, for sure. It's a great question. And, I kind of struggled with some of that earlier in my career. As I get older and my hair gets a little more grayer, you kind of stop worrying about what people think about you a whole lot. And I think that's okay. But I really focus on trying to dive into the data and using data and information to make recommendations. And, I found that I can sleep a lot better if I'm true to that, because I know what I care about, and that's deer and wildlife management and conservation. And if I can know that I'm confident that the data is supported and I make a recommendation based on that, anybody that's pushed against that, and I'm okay with that if they have a different opinion. And you just kind of learn to sort of brush some of that off after a while.
Well, it's a topic that you can't win. No matter what you do, you're going to make somebody happy. You might make somebody mad. You might make somebody happy, but you're going to make somebody mad. If you want to start a fight in Michigan, you talk about politics, you talk about religion, or you talk about deer management, and you're right there in the crosshairs. So I appreciate what you do. We're very, very early into the season at this point. I think the only numbers I can even think about is I did see some numbers on the youth hunt, and I was actually surprised. People talk about the youth hunt decimating our deer population. Biologically, statistically, it's not that big a deal, is it?
No, it usually translates to about 2% of our total harvest that weekend. So, there's a lot of opinions on the youth season, and really it doesn't even make a dent in our overall deer herd or our deer harvest for the year.
So I'm stammering here because I don't know how to go to the next question here. But so if the youth season is such an insignificant part of the harvest, why even have it?
Yeah, and we get that a lot too. I think a big thing is we're big on the opportunity, and if you look at our deer management plan, we really emphasize opportunity for people to get out. And with opportunity comes flexibility in how you spend your time outdoors. I think when the youth season was probably originally developed, there was hope that it would try to curb some of the hunter numbers and the loss of hunters that we're experiencing over time. And I think over time, it's fair to say that we've continued to lose hunters. So, that hasn't worked. Now, we don't know what the negative of that is. We don't know how many hunters we may have lost if the youth season never existed. But ultimately, there's a lot of conflict with youth and time, and we think just giving them one extra weekend is worth it.
Hang tight, Chad. We got to take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. We're talking with DNR wildlife biologist Chad Steward. We've got to take a break. When we come back, some more questions for Chad, including this week's Ask Avery question. Chad has graciously, I don't even know if he's agreed yet. He's going to stick around for another segment to answer this week's Ask Avery segment and more right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Lansing on WILS 1320 AM. You can hear us in Ludington on News 97.98, 98.7 WLDN. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Manistee on WTIQ 1490 AM, 95.3 FM. The Ask Avery segment is brought to you each week by the good folks from Security Credit Union. Security Credit Union loves to work with outdoorsmen and women, and they can help you with your next outdoor adventure. Check them out online at securitycu.org. That's securitycu.org. The way the Ask Avery question works, this is your chance to get involved in the content of the show. You can pose a question directly to me that you would like me to answer, or if you think maybe I have access to people that you don't, DNR, MUCC, NRC, whatever, you can have me forward the question on to them. The best way to get those questions to me is to send me an email, mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. That's mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. However, that's not how this week's Ask Avery question got to me. Mike Davis sent me a Facebook message. And again, this will work, but I don't always see him. But Mike sent me a message. He says, Mike, have you heard anything about the DNR having a permit you can buy for being able to bait for deer on private property? He said, I've heard this from a couple of different sources. Now, I pretty much know the answer to this, but I'm not the guy who makes these decisions or not the guy who makes these recommendations. Chad Stewart, DNR wildlife biologist, is one of those people. Chad, I know you have seen this question because I sent it to you ahead of time. What's the answer to this?
Yeah, appreciate it, Mike. The answer is no. We do not have that permit available, and I'm not aware of any discussions entertaining the thought of developing such a permit.
It would, I'll tell you personally, I would like to see us be able to bait. I'm not a biologist. I'm not an expert. So, Chad, I will defer to you guys and I will respect your decisions. If you did this, though, it would really, I think, undermine the position you've taken on CWD and baiting and feeding.
100%. And that's one of the reasons why we're not doing it. Whether you agree with it or not, our position on baiting is that it's going to concentrate deer at a greater level, a greater frequency than what would normally exist on the landscape. So we have, in our mind, a biological reason for not allowing baiting. If we were to suddenly go against that just for the sale of an extra permit to bring more money in, I'm in complete agreement with you, Mike. It would undermine what we've been saying for years about the importance of limiting bait on the landscape in terms of concentrating whitetail deer, wildlife, et cetera. So for that reason, we've not had any discussion on that. It's one of those rumor mill things that is sort of built up and apparently gained some traction, but it is not being considered.
Question has been asked ad nauseum, but listen, we've got the opportunity. We got a couple of minutes yet, so I'll follow up on this. How can you say baiting is bad because it attracts deer? However, Apples attract deer. I mean, below an apple tree. Orchards attract deer. Food plots attract deer. So what's the difference, Chad?
Yeah, I think the difference there is that, humans can control one thing and they can't control the other. So when you have naturally producing apples, acorns falling from an oak tree, et cetera, deer are naturally going to congregate under those areas because there's a food source, but that food source is limited. Once all the apples fall off, once all the acorns fall off, and get consumed, then it's done. What happens with baiting is that you're continually replenishing that food source to the point where you are starting to affect behavior of white-tailed deer. And that's what baiting does. You're trying to bring them into an area over time more frequently. So when you actually stand up there to, get your bow, your crossbow, your gun, et cetera, the likelihood of that deer being in that location is higher because you've habituated them to that area because of continual replenishment of food. And in that way, you're altering behavior above and beyond what normally exists on the landscape.
And of course, the reason for this concern is CWD, chronic wasting disease. Real quick, Chad, is CWD still as high a priority as a concern as it was, or are you starting to think that we can learn as Michigan hunters just how to live with this and deal with it?
I think it's a little bit of both. It is a concern. It is a priority. We spend a lot of time talking about it. At the same time, I don't know if we have a solution for chronic wasting disease. We're trying to, manage it as best as we can, but we don't have a way to reverse it. I think some of the concerns early on with CWD was that it would have potentially tremendous long-term impacts on the whitetail resource. I think there is a way to live with CWD in your deer herd. That being said, you don't want it to continue to build up in your deer herd and expand and spread because we are trying to manage our resource for future generations.
Chad, appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Thanks for answering this week's Ask Avery segment. Chad, a biologist for the Michigan DNR, michigan.gov/DNR. And a big thanks to the folks at Security Credit Union for making each week's Ask Avery segment possible. Check them out online at securitycu.org. That's securitycu.org. When we come back in our third hour, the Whitetail Whisperer, John Eberhart, and of course Dixie Dave right here on Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Mike Avery has covered the outdoors in Michigan for more than 4 decades, and that tradition continues today. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Ieuter Insurance Group, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polarcraft Boats, Primal Outdoors, Security Credit Union, Offshore Tackle, Garber Chevrolet, Rapid River Knife Works, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Indeed, this is the big guy, Mike Avery. Thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to hour number 3 of this week's Outdoor Magazine radio show here on the Outdoor Magazine radio network on more than 30 radio stations across the great state of Michigan. Thanks a lot for joining us this week. I do certainly appreciate it. I don't know if I say that enough to you. I do appreciate it. I've been doing this a long time in one form or another, either TV or radio, or social media and all that stuff. And it wouldn't be possible for me to have been down this career path without people consuming the product, the material, the media that I put out along the way. If you have spent much time with me in the past, I hope you know, and I'll make this very clear right now. I don't consider myself to be an expert in anything. I have some knowledge of broadcasting. I have some knowledge of live streaming. I have some knowledge of how to tell a story using different types of media. but I'm not an expert at it. I'm not even great at it, and sometimes I'm not even good at it. That's why I have so much respect for people who I do consider to be experts. And backing up a step here, though I'm not an expert in anything, I know people who are. I am friends with people who are. I have a to use an old term, I have a pretty big Rolodex. And if you don't know what that is, that's a list of contacts. And I have enjoyed getting to know and meet and work with people who are true experts in their field. I find the way that they think to be fascinating. Because somebody who is truly an expert will take their given topic of knowledge, their subject matter that they're an expert in, and they will go way beyond what the average person does, way beyond what I do in how they approach that passion. John Eberhart is an excellent example of that. John is arguably Michigan's best deer hunter. I don't even know if you can argue it. If you look at the record books, he's the man. He's the Whitetail Whisperer. And I've got him on the Outdoor Magazine phone line this week. John, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Mike. You always give me a great introduction, and you caught yourself dating yourself when you said Rolodex. I love it. You mentioned that to young people now. What the hell is a Rolodex?
The minute that came out of my mouth, I thought, uh-oh.
Good catch.
Let me rephrase. The list of contacts in my phone is very deep. How about that? Is that better?
There you go. And I would have to disagree with something on your introduction because you are, without question, an expert broadcaster.
Well, I appreciate that. If I have any skill set at all, it would indeed be in that area. You know me, John. We've talked a bunch of times. I love hunting. I have a passion for the outdoors. When it comes to deer hunting, that's not my area. I would rather turkey hunt. I would rather bear hunt. I'd rather fish walleye than deer hunt. But I do it because it is a part of our state's history and tradition. It is a part of my family's history and tradition. So I want to participate because I want to continue that tradition.
I totally get it. Yep. I agree. I love to fish and I do all that other stuff. But on the other hand, I gear myself at things. I think deer hunting, especially in Michigan with a bow, it's just such a challenge, and I just embrace the challenge. And I also love sharing my information through all the podcasts and books and stuff. And I love getting feedback from people, hunters killing deer and sending me testimonials with pictures. And it's just very gratifying to me.
Well, the Eberhart system, if you can call it that, with, knock on doors, no lease, scent control. I mean, you've got this thing fine-tuned. You've been doing it for long enough, man. You got it dialed in.
Yeah, I like to feel like I have it dialed in. And it's everything I've done has been on public land and knock on doors for free permission properties. And if I go out of state, usually I go out of state once a year. There are states with free walk-on properties. So that's also, it's just like public land. You just park and go in if it's got a WOH, walk-on hunting sign on it. So, yeah, I've never leased, never owned anything, never paid a dime to hunt any place. And I believe I have the most bucks in the Michigan record book with the bow. I've got 34. And again, they all came off public and knock on doors for free permission properties. There's lots of guys that have several bucks in the books, but if, the guys that have several, usually they come off one magnificent piece of private property or managed property, and that's just something that doesn't really interest me. I have the means to buy land. I just like the challenge of hunting against everybody else and competing.
Well, you're going against the grain of what has become deer hunting today, because deer hunting today is you have your own land or you lease land, you put in food plots, you put out trail cameras, you establish a hit list, you name the deer on your hit list, You have sheds from that deer from previous years. You wait until that deer is mature. I mean, that's what deer hunt. Well, if you buy into the TV deer hunting today, that's what deer hunting is today.
Yeah, and I definitely don't buy into the TV zoo type hunting. I do not perceive any of the TV personalities. I shouldn't say any. That's a pretty broad statement. But I'd say 95% of them, I think there's lots of hunters across the country and lots of heavily pressured states and public lands that could easily out-hunt most of the TV guys. The TV guys are good on their managed property with no competition and lots of mature bucks where the deer, they're accustomed to that person's odor. They never get shot at till they're 4 or 5 years old, so they have no negative consequences with few hunter interactions they've had while growing to maturity. And it's like hunting in a zoo. It's almost, a lot of the TV shows are not a whole lot different than hunting in an enclosure. It's, they'll sit there in a picked cornfield or a food plot and they'll have 10 or 15 bucks come out with 3 of them shooters. And, I've watched several shows. I hate watching them, but once in a while I do just to get a good laugh, and they can't decide which one they want to shoot. It's just so out of the norm for normal bow hunters. And while social media is pushing that agenda, and most of the hunting magazines are pushing the own your own land, food plots, easy hunting, and that's what I call it, is simple, easy hunting. It's like going out to Kansas. In a week I'm going to see a dozen Pope and Young bucks in a week, and I might not see a dozen Pope and Young bucks in Michigan in 5 years of hunting all the time. It's just easy. They move a lot during daylight hours. There's so many mature bucks that they compete heavily for breeding competitions, so they move a lot more during the daylight. They respond to tactics, decoys, calling, scents, and they just don't do that on public lands in heavily pressured states and areas. It's just a totally different ballgame. It's reality.
What about the Michigan hunter, the guy or gal, who has to go out to state land, who has limited time to hunt, and they want to put venison on the table, and if a 1.5-year-old 4-point walks in front of them and they take that, any negative thoughts towards that hunter at all, John?
Me? Absolutely not. No, if you want to, it's hard to kill a 4-pointer on public land in Michigan. Knock yourself out. You pay taxes, you help pay for the public land, and if you want to go kill a 3-inch spike with its illegal buck, you can put a tag on it. I have no negative thoughts whatsoever. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, because that person is still a deer hunter. That person bought a license. That person bought the gear. They think of themselves as a hunter because they are. When it comes time to vote on hunting-related issues, we're all in this together.
Absolutely, and it takes a lot of work in a state like a Michigan or a PA or a New York or states in the Northeast with a lot of high general population and lots of hunting pressure on public lands. It's hard to kill any antlered buck. I've just gotten to the point where I've got my routine and scent control refined to the point I target mature bucks, and I don't always kill them. There was 2018, 2019, and 2020. I never saw a shooter buck in Michigan in 3 full seasons. Now, in 2022, I shot 2 book bucks, and last year I shot 1 book buck, and I shot 1 book buck each of those years out of state as well. So it's just not easy, but I like the challenge. And then those years that I don't kill, those years I didn't kill a buck in Michigan, I shot those for the freezer in the late season.
We're talking with John Eberhart, the Whitetail Whisperer. You can learn more about John on his website, Eberhart's WhitetailWorkshop.com. That's Eberhart's WhitetailWorkshop.com. And we will talk more with John about that Whitetail Workshop after the break. But we do have to take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with John about so many things. I enjoy my conversations with John because we can go any direction, and I never know what direction we're going to go until we get there. And for me, that's fun. That makes it fun on my end. John Eberhart, Eberhart's WhitetailWorkshop.com. More coming up after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Manistee on WMLQ, that's 97.7 FM. You can hear us on the other side of the state, Port Huron, WPHM, 1380 AM. And you can hear us in the North Country, Traverse City, WTCM, 580 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Reeder Landscaping. I had the guys from Reeder over at the house the other day. Now, they were trimming up some trees, just some ornamental trees at the corner of the house. They really gotten kind of out of control. I could have done that job, right? I've got a ladder and I've got pruners and I could have done it, but it would have taken some time. And right now, this time of year, time is kind of at a premium, isn't it? In fact, because the guys at Reeder were at my house and trimming trees, it allowed me to take advantage of a break in the weather, or take advantage of that nice weather and run the Angler Quest over to Linwood Beach to get it ready for the wintertime season. So my point is, a lot of these jobs you can do yourself, but do you want to? That's why I bring in the folks from Reeder. They have the time, they have the talent, and they have the people to get these jobs done. And as you probably heard just in that commercial a minute ago, too, fall is actually a great time to think about landscaping projects, because they can come in now, they can plant the flowering shrubs, they can plant the trees, and you can beat the rush from next spring. Plus, there's the fall trimming, the fall cleanup, all that stuff, blowing out the sprinkler systems. Reeder is like your one-stop shop when it comes to landscaping. Check them out online at reederlandscaping.com. That's reederlandscaping.com. While you are online, please head over to my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com, and then jump on over to Eberhart's WhitetailWorkshop.com. John Eberhart, the Whitetail Whisperer, is on the phone line with us right now. John, tell me more about, not specifically this website, but this whole concept of a whitetail workshop. This is something you started a few years ago now.
Yeah, I started them in 2017, and probably the easiest way to get to that website is deer-john.net. Deer-john.net is probably the easier way.
Will take us to the same. So, okay, deer-john.net. I will use that one in the future then. But what's the thinking behind the whole concept, John?
I just wanted to put something together. I was asked, I get asked all the time, go scout, would you please come scout my property, and they'll pay you whatever. And I thought, you know what, I'll try these whitetail workshops, and they've worked out really, really well. And I have 15 guys per shop, and they come up to central Michigan, and we go out in the woods, and I show them some of my locations, the entry routes, exit routes, show them how high I am up the tree, why I'm up that high, what time of year I'm hunting it. Is it an early season location? Is it a lull location? Is it a pre-rut location? Is it a peak rut location? Is it a morning location? Is it an evening location? Every location has a time that it should be hunted, and I'll go into season with maybe 40 locations prepared. I may only hunt a dozen or 15 of them during the course of the season, but they are all specifically for a particular seasonal and daily timing. They all have a seasonal and daily timing for each location, and a lot of hunters just don't understand that. And it's an educational deal. It's a 2-day deal. The second day is pretty much a 6-hour seminar held at Jay's Sporting Goods in Clare. And the first day we were out in the field from 8:30 in the morning until about 5 in the afternoon, and then I have about a 2-hour saddle hunting presentation where if they want to stay and go through that, I'll do that. Where I actually have several trees prepped pretty low to the ground where people can try different types of hunting saddles.
Saddle hunting.
Yeah.
Everybody's an expert on that one now, John.
Well, they think they are. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and I am blown away at how many people are up there showing what they do with a saddle, and most of them are not very good at it. I hate to say they do things I would never consider doing, but everybody's got to go through their own trials and errors. So one thing I did want to touch on when we get some time, I wanted to touch on something that's pertinent right now for hunters, this time of the season. So if we've got a few minutes.
We've got it. Let's do it. Absolutely.
Okay. Over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, I've been doing something that I've never heard of being done before during the lull. to me, Michigan is such, if you're hunting public lands and free knock-on doors where you've got other hunters on the property that ask permission as well, you're hunting pressured stuff. Typically, prior to season, there's been so much preseason scouting and location preparation. Most of the mature bucks that I want to kill, and a lot of your viewers would want to kill, they're usually nocturnal before the season even opens, because as soon as that heavy influx of human activity happens in late August and September, people going in the woods and looking around, they know that's danger. To them, that's a threat to their existence. So they're not bedding out in the ferns and in the the timber or open timber. They're pushed back into the bedding areas now, where they're more secure, and they're usually back in those bedding areas before daylight even happens. So I usually, like the first 3 to 5 days of season, I'll hunt my mast and fruit tree locations, that are physically dropping mast, like white oaks and red oaks and apple trees. And they're strictly evening locations, because obviously if they're primary feeding locations, because public lands don't have ag, their primary feeding locations, I can't hunt them in the mornings because I'm spooking deer with my entries, obviously, because they're going to be feeding at them. So they're strictly evening locations. So what I've been doing, and I've been doing this through the lull, actually, I consider the first 5 days to be early season in Michigan. By then, it's over. Any mature buck I want to kill is in a bedding area. He might move in the daylight in the bedding area, but he's not going to move outside that bedding area during daylight hours. So what I will do, and I've done this extremely successfully the last several years, is I will hunt edges of standing corn. As soon as the corn's cut, they're worthless. But while they're standing corn, they are bedding areas. The mature bucks, if you're in an ag area, if there's a mature buck, odds are really, really high. If there's been much preseason scouting and any kind of human activity, they're bedding in those bedding areas, because they're secure bedding areas. Nobody ever steps foot on them, and they can feed in those bedding areas. Or I will, lots of times when I'm scouting public lands, I'll scout a public land and I'll find a bedding area that's pretty decent, but I have better bedding areas that I want to hunt during the rut phases. I have better public land bedding areas that I'm going to put into my rotation during the rut phases. But I will keep these bedding areas, and I'll note them, and then during the lull, which I figure is from the 5th of October through the 20th to the 25th of October, when mature bucks, their testosterone hasn't kicked up so they're moving outside of the bedding areas during daylight, and they're staying in the bedding areas. If it's a bedding area that I know I'm not going to hunt during the rut phases, because I don't want to intrude into a bedding area I'm going to hunt during the rut phases, I don't want to alter any activity, I'll go in really early in the morning. I'll get in my tree about an hour and a half before daylight, and I'll do rattle sequences. Or if I'm on the edge of a standing cornfield, I'll do rattle sequences. Because if you're on the edge of a standing cornfield that butts up to timber, and they're bedding in the standing corn, you can do rattle sequences and physically draw them out to the edge of the corn, because they've got that instant security cover. They're right there to the edge. We're one bound and they're in the standing corn. And over the last year, by the 15th of October, and I'm not going to say rattle because it's not rattle. I'm sparring. I'm doing sparring sequences, which is light tickling of the antlers. I sparred in 16 bucks last year by the 15th of October in Michigan. Wow. And only 2 of them were good bucks. I killed one, and when I say rattled in 2 good bucks, it was the same buck. I rattled him in on the 5th of October. I had him at 5 yards. I drew on him twice, broadside at 5 yards, and I didn't shoot him because he was borderline. He was like a 115. 8-point. And then once he went back into the corn after I let my arrow up twice, I thought to myself, John, you're an idiot. That's the biggest buck you have on camera. That's the biggest buck you have on camera in this area. And you just let him walk. And then I rattled in that same buck again on the 15th and shot him in a different tree. I would never rattle from the same tree. Because they have a memory, and they came in, there was nothing there, so I just don't want to do it from the same tree. But and then in 2021, that was 2022, both bucks I killed in Michigan were during the lull, One was on October 3rd, and the other was October, I think, the 16th. And I rattled both of those in. One was in a bedding area on public land, and the other one was out of a standing cornfield. So I consider those free hunts because you're hunting in a bedding area that you're not going to hunt during the rut phases. So if you spook deer, it's irrelevant. You're not hurting your rut phase locations. And when you're rattling along the edge of standing corn, you're also not interfering with, even if you're on private property. If you're hunting along the edge of standing corn, you're not intruding into your rut phase locations once the corn is picked that are going to be back in the timber. You're not altering doe traffic to those rut phase locations you're going to hunt later in the season when bucks are going to move in the daytime outside of the bedding areas. So I consider them free hunts. You have nothing to lose. It's morning hunts, so if you've got food locations that you want to set up on, oaks and apples or whatever, those are going to be evening locations anyway, where you can actually go in. They're not there in the evening when you go in, so you can physically hunt those and hope something comes in. But for morning hunts, it's just worked out really, really well. Sparring works, and when I say sparring, it's just, and I have YouTube videos on this, several of them. I have a YouTube channel called Eberhart Outdoors, and it's this. As soon as bucks shed their velvet and get hard-horned, hard-antlered, horned, they don't have horns. They have
Gotcha.
As soon as they get hard-antlered, they start sparring for pecking order. So they're not fighting. It's not uncommon to see a big 8-point spar with a 4-point. And they just put their heads together and I'm sure you've heard it, tickle their heads, and they push each other for dominance. And what they're doing is they're establishing the local deer herd's buck pecking order. So then during the rut phases, they don't have to physically fight. Usually they know each other, and they know that buck can kick my butt. So if I'm with a hot doe and he comes in and he takes her over, I'm not going to fight with him because he's a more dominant, stronger buck.
John, I'm so glad you brought this up because this is a topic I wanted to follow up on anyway. Can I offer you the coveted third segment? Can you stick around?
Absolutely. All
right, we're talking with John Eberhart, the Whitetail Whisperer. His website, deer-john.net, deer-john.net. More on the concept of rattling to bucks on the edge of a cornfield. I find this fascinating after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Muskegon on WKBZ, that's 1090 AM. You can hear us in Tawas on WIOS, 1480 AM, 106.9 FM. In fact, you can hear us twice each weekend on WIOS. And you can also hear us, by the way, you can hear us twice each weekend in Port Huron on WPHM 1380. And you can hear us twice each weekend in Saginaw on News Radio 790, WSGW, and 100.5 WSGW as well. I'm in the studios of WSGW right now. But for these 3 hours, this small corner of the building, I'm calling it the Outdoor Magazine studio. And nobody's argued with me yet because you know what? I got a logo behind me that kind of proves it. I'm here with Jonathan Dent. John doing a wonderful job as always. John, I appreciate that very much. Also appreciate the Whitetail Whisperer giving us the coveted third segment. John, not everybody gets that offer,
Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
I do want to talk more about this rattling, and this is not rattling like we see again on the TV shows. This is tickling of antlers. This is sparring on the edge of a cornfield. I find this very, very interesting because we've all seen this, right? We walk down the edges of these cornfields to get to where we're hunting. It's a corridor between the standing corn and the woods. But how do you set up here? I mean, you've only got, 5 yards of an opening here. What's your setup, John?
I will usually set up in a tree that's pretty much on the edge. There's usually a little 4 or 5 yard buffer of grass, and then there's woods. And obviously, like when I'm scouting, if I see scrapes or I see several runways coming out of a field in the spring, and I know that field's going to be into corn this fall, I will set up where there's obvious sign, but there doesn't have to be sign. Okay, if you got sign, that's a little added plus. If you got runways or scrapes on the edge of a crop field and it's going to be in standing corn that fall, I'll set something up or get something ready in a tree by the best sign. But if there is no sign, it doesn't matter. But I try to be in a tree that has the best security cover outside of the corn. Mature whitetails are a different breed of animal as killing your 1.5 and 2.5 year olds. You have to in my opinion, in a state like Michigan, if you're consistently killing 1.5 and 2.5 year olds and you want to step up to 3.5 and older bucks, which are very rare beings in this state, you have to almost throw everything you were doing away and restart because you're hunting a different breed of animal. They're extremely security cover oriented. They rarely move outside of security cover, maybe down the edges of security cover, like they'll transition along the edge of a standing cornfield or maybe just inside the edge of a bedding area, but they are always security cover oriented. They want to be within 1 or 2 bounds of security cover where as soon as there's any danger, they're safe. So standing cornfields are security cover. Bedding areas are obviously security cover, and that's why I'm rattling there. And when you set up in a tree, you can typically shoot down into the corn. That's not a big deal. And also, typically, they will move to the edge. Usually, they will step out just outside of the corn so they can get a visual of where whatever the bucks were there that were sparring. And that's all I do. In the mornings, I'll usually do just 2 sequences. You don't do this like every half hour. People that go out and rattle or spar, and they do it multiple times during a sit, like every half hour. I've had many guys email me that. What do I do? Do this every half hour? No. You do 2 sequences, 5 minutes apart, like there's 2 bucks there. They spar for a few minutes, or for a minute maybe, and then they stop and they're doing whatever, browsing, and then they'll do another sparring sequence. So I'll do one in the mornings. I'll usually do one at about 7:45, and then about another one at 7:50. And then in the evenings, I'll do one at about because the the daytime, when it's getting dark changes throughout the season. About an hour to 45 minutes before dark is when I'll do it, and then I'll do another one 5 minutes after that, and then it's done. So you only do 2 sequences per sit, but you have to be on the edge of security cover or in a physical bedding area, because otherwise they just won't feel secure moving to the edges or within the bedding area where you can get a shot opportunity.
So do you have any sense? Can you hear them coming through the corn? I mean, do you know they're coming, or do you just have to be on edge the whole time because they're going to surprise you? Boom, there they are.
No, you can hear them coming.
Okay.
In the mornings, it's almost always dead flat calm. Yeah, you can hear them coming from 50 to 100 yards away, even though the corn's got dew on it, and it's kind of quiet. You can still hear the corn rust.
Yeah, that's got to be exciting.
Oh, yeah. It was kind of interesting because I did a video on it. I did a couple YouTube videos on it, and a young man in Kalamazoo shot. He said, "Well, I'm going to try that. I got a cornfield here on my property," and he shot 100. He rattled. He did his first sparring sequence, and within a minute, this 150-some inch 10-point came out and he shot it. You can imagine what he felt like.
He's like, "Hey, that Eberhart knows what he's talking about."
Yeah, that's it. But you got to do it correctly. You can't make the noises they make on TV. That spooks deer in Michigan. Yeah. We don't have bucks that make those types of sounds, so it's got to be subtle. And when it's dead calm in the morning, a buck can hear a sparring sequence probably 150, 200 yards out.
I'm going to try this, John. I'm definitely going to try this. Listen, I got to let you go. I appreciate your time as always. The website, deer-john.net, deer-john.net. Thank you, John Eberhart, the Whitetail Whisperer, for your expertise and for your time. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, we'll wrap it all up with wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Minar right here on Outdoor Magazine. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. My name is Mike Avery. My website is MikeAveryOutdoors.com. That's MikeAveryOutdoors.com. My email address, if you want to reach out to me, it's Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. Now, when I say reach out, it's like, okay, you have a question for the Ask Avery segment? Do you have a suggestion for somebody you'd like to hear on the show? Do you have a gripe or a complaint? That's fine. I mean, seriously, I want to hear from you. Send me your pictures as well of your hunting and fishing adventures. Let's share them with other like-minded people. Mike at MikeAveryOutdoors.com. I really enjoyed that conversation with John Eberhart. I love to talk with people who are knowledgeable in their areas of expertise and who want to share that expertise with others, which leads me right into wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Minar. The man is an absolute master. He spent decades and decades in the kitchen, and he loves to share his knowledge and his recipes with us, and he's with us once again. David, welcome back. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm really good, Michael, and yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm doing really good here. You know, we've got this change in the weather coming in. Should be real nice for this weekend. Did you make it out yet at all, Dave?
No, I've been too busy. We're getting the last half of our house delivered, so we bought a modular. So the guys are working on it fast and furious, and I'm here.
That's up north, right?
Yep.
So,
yep.
So are you? No, I don't want to get into your personal business. I'll talk to you about that offline. How about a recipe for us, Dave?
Well, first, if we could plug October 16th for Delta College, they have a fundraiser. And if you get in touch with Delta College, ask for Gwen, and she'll sell you some tickets. They're like $100 a piece, but it's good publicity for Delta, and it's a fundraiser for Delta also. And
it's a fundraiser. The Michigan Outdoors crew, Jimmy and those guys, they're good people. I like them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, we got a rabbit casserole. You're going to need 2 or 3 rabbits, maybe between 3 and 5 pounds of dressed rabbits, whatever that might work out to. And it's going to be kind of a large batch. And you want to cut the rabbits by 6 or 8, depending on how you like, whether you get a leg and a thigh or however you want to cut it. You need a medium onion, diced fine, not really fine, kind of a little larger than fine. 2 to 3 carrots diced about the same size, 2 stalks of celery diced the same way, 2 potatoes about the same size, and you're going to put them in water and save them to add to this until about 30 minutes before it's done. So it's going to take about an hour and a half to finish this meal. You need a can of sweet potatoes in syrup, drained, and they're in nice big chunks. And so what you're going to do is have a can of peach slices, and those 2 items are going to go in after you get everything mixed up and all of that. And you want to lay that on top so it doesn't sink in too much. 2 to 3 jars of chicken gravy, about a teaspoon or more of basil to your flavor, 3 to 4 cloves of garlic diced up nice and fine, salt and black pepper grated all over the meat before you dredge it in flour. And then you need a little bit of olive oil to saute this with. So what you're going to do is make sure that the rabbits have been cleaned up of if you're using a shotgun, make sure that there's any shot and hair driven into the meat. And then you're going to dredge the meat in flour after you grate the pepper all over it. And don't crowd the meat in pans. You want to saute it in batches. And I forgot to say, this is a real Southern-style dish, and they use it for everything. So you want to place the meat in an oven-proof casserole, cover with gravy, and then mix it up real good. And then you're going to add the sweet potatoes and the peaches on top. You kind of want to lay it on top. And you don't want to stir it after this. You want to leave them set right there. Bake it at 350 degrees for an hour and a quarter to an hour and a half, or until the meat is falling off of the bones of the rabbit. And you want to leave this uncovered. And this recipe could be used for muskrat, woodchuck, possum, squirrel. Down south, they do a dish like this, and they use possum even. So it's quite a versatile dish.
You say it's a Southern style dish. What does that mean, Dave? What makes it Southern?
Well, it's the way that they do stuff. They simmer a lot of things, make stews out of it, kind of, and they like a lot of their wild game, they like it a little sweeter than we would up here up north. But, it's really a good dish, and I've made this with possum and woodchuck also.
Possum and woodchuck. I can't imagine that, but I know from working with you over the years that you can make anything taste pretty darn good.
You want to know something, Michael? We've used possum for this recipe about 25 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, I pulled it out of the archives.
All right, David, listen, good luck on the house project. I hope you get a chance to get out hunting here pretty soon when the weather turns, and I will look forward to talking with you again next week with another recipe.
Okay, how did you and your grandson do?
We got out and we got in the field, didn't see a thing, but we had a good time, and that's all that matters. All right, David, we'll talk to you next time, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wild game chef extraordinaire Dixie Dave Minar, a big part of the Outdoor Magazine show, as are you. Because if you weren't listening, there'd be no reason to do the show. And that would make me very sad. Again, my name is Mike Avery. The website is MikeAveryOutdoors.com. You can follow me on social media, too. I'm on... I do a lot of stuff on Facebook, some on Instagram, some on YouTube. Just go to the website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. Don't forget about our Wednesday night lives every Wednesday night on the social media outlets. Email address Mike@MikeAveryOutdoors.com. Have a great week. I will look forward to talking with you next time right here on Outdoor Magazine.